Hello and welcome to the course of Programming Fundamentals with Python. In this lecture, we are going to study local variables and global variables. If you remember, in the previous 2 weeks, we studied about functions, user-defined function, how they are used inside Python, how they are created, how they are defined, how they are called, how parameters are passed, arguments are passed to the functions, and how functions can return values. Today's topic is also related with the functions and it is about local and global variables. Let us see the roadmap for today's presentation. We will start by the objectives, what are expected to be learned at the end of this week. After that, we will discuss about the scope of a variable. What is the scope of a local variable? What is the scope of a global variable? And why we use global keyword? Finally, we will shed some light on the non-local variables. And after that, we will end this lecture with the lifetime of a variable. Let us see the objectives of this lecture. At the end of this lecture, you would be able to understand the concept of scope, variable scope, whether it is a local variable or a global variable, their definition, their role inside programming, and their scope. Scope mean from where you can actually access that variable inside your program. You will also learn about the two types of variables which are very common in any programming language. They are the local variable as well as the global variable. Beside that, you will also learn about a third type of variable which is known as the non-local variable, which has been introduced in Python 3. And all these concepts will enable you to write programs which will demonstrate the concept of local, global, as well as non-local variable. Let us start with a variable scope. In the functions, we studied that function is actually a block of code, or you can say that it is actually actually a mini program. Function itself is like a mini program which carry on an operation, a specific task. That is the responsibility of a function. In that context, the variable scope is actually the part of the program in which you can access a variable. As your program get larger and larger, they will contain more and more variables. In that case, maybe you will encounter some problems where you will not be able to access a variable because that variable is defined in a different part of your program, or that variable is defined in another mini program, in another function, in another block, and you will not be able to access that variable directly. And sometime the problem will arise because two variable definitions will conflict with one another. Maybe the variable name are same and you want to refer to one variable but you are accidentally referring to another variable. So this problem will arise when your program gets larger and when your program contain more variables. So to resolve these problems, you will need to use the concept. You need to familiar with the concept of the scope of a variable. In very simple word, the scope of a variable is actually the part of the program in which you can access that variable. So you can say that it is actually the extent of a code in which a variable can be accessed or can be modified or can be referenced. For example, here we have a simple example. In this example, we have a user-defined function which name is result, and also we have a variable marks. Now this is the body of this function. I will not go into the details because we have already covered these concepts. What is important for us to understand is the scope of this variable marks. Actually, this variable is defined inside a function. Okay, so this marks is accessible from inside the body of this function in this area. But this variable cannot be accessed from outside the body of that function because the scope The scope of this variable marks is inside the body of the function. Okay, this is your home. You are living in it. Everybody knows about you. But outside your home, nobody knows about you. If you want to access this variable from outside the body of that function, that variable will not be recognizable. Okay, we will shed more light on it later on. Now let us see the different types of variable. The first type is local variable. As the name indicate, when you create a variable inside a function, then that variable is actually a local variable for that function. So you can say that a variable that is defined within a function is actually known as a local variable. Or you can say that local variable exists only within a function body. They cannot be referred outside the function body. As we just saw in this case, marks cannot be referred outside the body of that function. So in this case, marks is actually a local variable. So any variable that is defined within the function body is known as a local variable. Okay, when a local variable is defined within a block, it becomes available from that point where it is defined or declared to the end of the function in which it is defined. Let us see an example. We have a function bugs, and inside the body of this function we have a variable numBugs. Now this variable will be accessible within this function from the point where it has been declared until the end of the body of this function, till here. Now if you want to access this variable from outside the body of this function, that will not be possible. It will give you an error. That is the scope of a local variable. It is actually the function within which it is defined. So it means that the variable, the local variable, exists within that function, and any object outside the scope of the function will not be able to access that variable. We will see the output of this program in the practical session of this lecture. But here, what is important for us is to understand the scope of a local variable. So in summary, a local variable is created inside a function and it cannot be accessed by statements that are outside that function. This is about local variable. To clarify the concept, let us see another example of a local variable. Okay, in this example, we are going to understand another concept, and that concept is about having or using name, same variable name inside different different functions. In this example, you can see we have two variables, result and result. Oh, they are the same. Is you're familiar with the fact that in our daily life we encounter with addresses, street names that are identical, like Main Street. It could be in Peshawar, it could be in Islamabad, it could be in Hayatabad, it could be in Bodh Bazaar, etc. So the same name may be possible. We encounter the same street name in different locations. Similarly, we encounter same name, person's name in different homes in the neighborhood. In a similar way, it is possible that different function can have local variables with the same name. And why it is possible? Because the function cannot see each other local variables. So in summary, different functions can have their own local variable that use the same variable name. And these local variable will actually not override one another since they exist in different functions. Their scope is different. For example, here in this example, we have a function main and we have a second function square. Inside the main function, we have a variable result. And inside the square function, we have a variable result as well. So you can see we have the same variables. Their names are same, but their scope are different. This result is not accessible from here, and this result variable is not accessible from here. Okay, because of the local scope of these variables. So that is completely possible. Okay. We will see the explanation of this program in the practical session. The point to get from here, the lesson take home, is that it is possible to declare or to use the same variable names inside different functions. That is the lesson to take home. Okay, this is another way to elaborate the same concept. Here we have three functions: main, Texas, and California. From inside the main function, we are calling Texas and then California. And inside these two functions, we have a variable with the same name, and that is birds. You see, birds is inside Texas, birds is inside California. But the actual thing is like this: they refer to different memory locations. They are not the same thing. Although there are two separate variables named birds in this program, only one of them is visible at a time because they are in different functions. Okay. So the take home lesson is that you can use variable with the same name inside different functions. Now let us talk about the scope of a local variable. Actually, the scope, as I just mentioned, is the part of a program in which the variable may be accessed. A variable is visible only to the statement in the variable scope. For example, a local variable scope is the function in which the variable is defined. Okay, so if you are asked what is the scope of a local variable, the simple answer is that the scope of a local variable is the function in which it is defined. It means that no statement outside the function can access that variable. Okay, that is the first lesson to learn about the scope of a local variable. In addition to this, a local variable cannot be accessed by the code that appear inside the same function but at the point before the variable has been created. This is very obvious reason. The first lesson is that okay, the local variable cannot be accessed from outside that function in which it is defined. That is clear. The second thing is that inside the same function in which the local variable has been defined, you cannot access it before the point where the variable has been created. Let us see an example to clarify the concept. Here we have a function my function. We have a variable lock. The value of lock is 100. And we are calling this function. Okay. Okay, we are calling this function. That's fine. But what is happening here? We are actually trying to access this variable from outside the body of the function in which it is defined. So that is not possible. It will give you an error. That is the first lesson. Second lesson. Inside the same function, we are trying to access the value of a variable before it is being declared or before it has been used or created. That is also not possible. And this is the second reason which I mentioned here, that you cannot access a variable within the same function before the variable has been created. And you can see it from here. We are trying to access the value of a variable a before it has been declared. It will also give you an error. However, if you move this statement to this location, then your program will work fine. This was the second lesson. Uh, Before going into the details of the second type of variable, which is known as global variable, I remember a point, and I think it is important to remember that actually parameters which we used inside the functions, they are also example of local variable because they are assigned a value when the function is invoked. and they cannot be referred outside the function too. So parameters of the function, they are also example of the local variable. After explaining the concept of the local variable, let us see what is a global variable. As the name indicate, it is actually the opposite of a local variable. You can create a variable inside a function. When you create it, it is known as a local variable. On the other side, variables that are assigned outside any function, they are known as global variable. Mean a global variable is defined outside the body of all the functions that are inside a program. So when a variable is created outside all of the functions, it is considered to be a global variable. And when a global variable are created, they can be accessed by any statement in your program, including by the statement in any function, which means a global variable can be accessed from anywhere inside the program. It can be accessed from within a function or outside the function body, and it can be accessed by any function, any statement inside the program, because it is a global. So the scope of a global variable is the program in which it is defined, not the function in which it is defined. Let us see an example. Here we have a variable name, and you can see the variable has been created, declared, defined outside the body of the function. You see, we have a function show name, and that variable name has been defined, created, declared outside the body of that function, which means it is a global variable. Now I want to access this global variable within a function like this. Hey, display the name. Okay, it will display the name Ali, and that is possible because the scope is global. And I want to access the same variable within the program but outside the body of the function like this. It is also possible. It will also display the name Ali because the variable has a scope global. So you can access a global variable within a function, any function, or you can access a global variable within a program outside the body of a function anywhere, from anywhere. That is also possible. Okay, a concept related with the global variable is the global keyword. Actually, the global variable can be accessed from anywhere inside the program. Okay, but the problem is that you cannot modify the global variable from inside a function. You can display the contents of a global variable, but if you want to modify the contents of this global variable within the body of a function, that is not possible. That is not possible. But we want to make it possible. Sometime it is important that you would need to modify the contents of the global variable. So that is possible, and that is possible with the help of a global keyword. So we can say that a global variable is visible to all the functions defined after the declaration of that variable. However, any function that wish to update the global variable, it must include the global declaration, or you can say the global keyword. Let us see an example. This is exactly an advanced version of the previous program. Don't worry about the program, we will explain it in the practical session. Here we have a global variable and its name is name. The content is early. Now I want to modify the contents of this global variable. For that, I need to explicitly tell the interpreter that, hey, There is a global variable and its name is name. And the global keyword must be there. If you did not mention this global variable, the global keyword here, then Python will consider it as a local variable. Okay, it will consider it as a local variable. To tell Python that we know that we are what we are doing, and we want to refer to a global variable at this point, then we have to use the keyword global with the name of the global variable. This is actually the syntax to refer to a global variable in order to define it. Now here I am printing the name. So the previous name is Ali. After that, this is the point. Now I am modifying the contents of a global variable from within the body of the function. That is possible because I have already told the interpreter that I am interested to refer to the global variable name and I want to modify the contents there. So it will actually modify the contents. Now the new contents is Bilal. If you want to access the value now, it is not Ali anymore. The new value is Bilal. So that is possible with the help of a global keyword. Some final thoughts about global variable. Uh, Actually, it is not recommended to use global variables within a program. Why? Generally, global variables are considered to be not a good programming idea. So you should avoid global variables in your program. Why? Because it makes your program hard to understand and it makes debugging difficult as well. Any statement in a program file can change the value of a global variable. So if you find that the wrong value is being stored in a global variable, you have to track down every statement that accesses it to determine where the bad value is coming from. In a program with thousands of lines of code, this becomes difficult. So that is why debugging is difficult and that is why you need to avoid using the global variable. And in practice, developers usually try to limit the number of global variables in their program. If you want to use them, then the recommendation is try to limit the number of global variables in your program. And why? Because global variable can be accessed from anywhere. It's not a secure programming approach. Privacy is another concern. Anybody can modify the code from anywhere. And this will also result in unexpected behavior in the program. In a similar way, when multiple functions update global variable, result can be difficult to predict and also difficult to maintain and extend. So due to these reasons, you will have to avoid the use of global variable. So instead of using global variable, the recommendation is that you can use function parameter variables. And you can also use return values to transfer information from one part of a program to another part of a program. So instead of using the global variable, you can use the parameters, the argument, the return functionalities of the function. And in most cases, you have to use the locally created variable and pass them as argument to the function. And they need to access them. Last point that I would like to share about the global variable is that many other programming languages treat variable as global if they are not declared explicitly. You can say by default in other languages the variables are global, while in Python the concept is opposite. The variable by default are local if they are not explicitly specified. And the reason behind this approach is that global variables are generally bad programming practices and they should be avoided. In order to do so, Python by default treated variable as local, while majority of other languages they treated variable as global by default. Now let us move our attention to the third category of variable, and that is known as the non-local variable. Actually, this category is introduced in the Python 3 and after that versions of the Python language. So you can say it a new kind of variable. And non-local variables are used mostly in nested functions whose local scope is not defined. This means that the variable can be either in the local, can neither be in the local and nor in the global scope. You can say non-local is something in between the local and global variable. Why? Because local variables are local to a specific function. And even functions defined within another function, they cannot modify the, the local variable of the outer function. You can say the inner function, in case of a nested functions, the inner function will not be able to modify the local variable of the outer function, because inner function are separate functions, separate modules, separate mini programs. They can reference it, but the issue is with the modification. You can say that the global keyword, we can use them there. Okay, they are also no help here, because the outer function variables are not global, they are local for function. To simplify the things, let us define a nested function. Here we have two functions, outer and inner. Okay, and this is nested. You see, the inner function is defined inside the outer function, so we can say this is like a nested approach. We are defining a function inside the body of another function, nested approach. Okay, now in the outer function we have a variable title, and it has the value original title. And then we have the same variable title, and it has the value another title. First I want to print it. Inner is a string, it will be displayed, and then title. Another title will be displayed because it will refer to the local variable. And then I want to display the statement. Outer will be displayed and then title. Now here, which variable is going to be access? This one. And it will display the title that is original title. So in this example, both outer and inner functions modify the title variable. However, they are not the same title variable, as long as this is what we need to do. Both functions have their own version of the local variable. Okay? But in some cases, if we want the inner function to modify the outer function title variable, we want this title to be modified within the body of the inner function. We cannot do this with this scenario. That is not possible. You cannot modify it directly. However, that is achievable with the help of non-local variable. The problem can be solved by using the non-local keyword. Now the definition: non-local variables are used in nested functions whose local scope is not defined. This means that the variable can neither be local nor global. Okay? To clarify the concept, here is another example, and that is about the non-local variable. We have nested functions, outer, inner, and you can see here I write the keyword non-local before the name of the variable. Now I'm explicitly telling the interpreter that I want to refer to the variable title which has been defined in the outer function. Now if you want to change the contents of this title, the changes will be reflected here. For example, the value was original title. After modification, the value is another title. So let us see how this program will run. Function definition, function declaration, then the body of the function. Inside the body of a function, we have a call to the inner function, and then this is the body of the inner function. Okay, first we have to call the outer function. We have a call for this function. This function has been called. Once the control transfer here, this statement will be executed. Okay, variable created, value assigned. Then we have a call. So the control will transfer sorry, we have a definition here, inner function definition. That is the body of the function. Okay. Come here, we are calling the function inner. Hey, we have a call. Execute the body. Okay. Refer to the title variable. Okay. Modify the title. Now the original title will be replaced by the another title. In the next line, we are actually displaying the value of the title, so it will display another title on the screen. Program execution of the inner function, body of the inner function completed. Now the control will transfer to the location from where we call it, that is here. And then we have another print function. This function will be called, and we are asking it to display the value of the title. So the value of the title is the same. There is another title. We have modified it. So it will again display another title on the screen. So if you want to modify the value of a local variable within the nested function, you can use the non-local keyword before the variable name. And that's it. So in this lecture, we covered different types of variables, local, global, and non-local, and also the scope. If you want to study lifetime of a variable, you can search it. That is your homework. But in summary, a variable lifetime actually refers to how long a variable will remain in existence. You can say that the lifetime of a local variable is limited to the execution time of the function in which the variable is defined. Okay? Like the lifetime of variable inside a function is as long as the function executes. And these local variables defined within the functions, they are destroyed as soon as the function returns or terminate. That is the lifetime, how long they will exist. On the other side, the lifetime of a global variable is indefinite. As long as the program exists, the global variable will remain there. Okay? So with these words, I'm going to finish this lecture. Thank you so much for watching the video. Please do subscribe to the channel. Goodbye.